So, welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've got almost 30 clips on several different topics for what I think should be a pretty good show tonight. As always, this is my weekly broadcast of the best clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the corporate media here in the United States, along with my commentary between the clips. This week, I'll be using clips from the Sunday morning news shows on the regular Big Five outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, and I'll also be using some quasi-news clips from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, which is back this week, and last night's Saturday Night Live on NBC, also back from vacation this week. And I'll use those clips to cover multiple topics, with the biggest topic this week being President Barack Obama's speech outlining possible limits on NSA spying on Friday, and Seth Meyers on last night's Saturday Night Live Weekend Update covered that speech like this.
President Obama on Friday proposed a series of overhauls to government surveillance programs that change the way the NSA collects phone data. For example, they'd like to change back to collecting it secretly.
So yeah, I guess that's kind of right, because if Edward Snowden hadn't made the revelations he made last June, I don't think the president would have been giving this speech last Friday, though I'm not sure a lot of people watched the full speech like I did, as Bill Maher pointed out at the end of his monologue on last Friday night's Real Time, that you can see in this clip.
Yes, but first, how many of you watched President Obama's big speech today on the NSA? That's weird, because he's watching you. Or is he? I don't know.
So I thought that was kind of funny. And then he actually, Bill Maher had a interview with Glenn Greenwald, who is the advocacy journalist who is one of the ones who Edward Snowden gave his leaks to. I don't have any clips from that, but if you have HBO or if you can access it, definitely something worth watching. But of course, as I pointed out previous weeks, I don't think that the actual comedy shows are the only source of comedy. When I do look for my news clips, I always like the comedy from The Bias over on Fox News. I want to show the intro to Fox News Sunday this morning, how they had on this whole NSA spying, there are all these important issues. So what do you think the most important issue to start Fox News Sunday was? How it shows President Obama is dishonest, of course. And you can see that in this introductory clip from Fox News Sunday here.
I'm Chris Wallace. President Obama sets new limits on government surveillance, but finds it's much harder to strike the balance as president than it was as a candidate.
No more illegal wiretapping of American citizens. No more ignoring the law when it is inconvenient.
We cannot prevent terrorist attacks or cyber threats without some capability to penetrate digital communications.
Now, I think actually the running of those two clips together is a little bit dishonest. If you want to know why, you can, I gave sort of a long explanation of this in a video I made back about 6 months ago called Impeach Obama for NSA Spying Program. And that was actually partially a response to an Amazing Atheist video where he called for impeaching Obama because he supposedly lied when he was a candidate about being against NSA spying, and then became for it when he became president. And as I point out in that video, it's kind of a simplistic analysis, because if you really paid attention when President Obama was running, he not only voted for Patriot Act reauthorization, which is where the 215 bulk phone record collection program comes from, but he also voted for the FISA Amendments Act while he was running for president. I even made a video back in 2008 when he was running for president. I don't have a screenshot of that, but called ACLU Fights Wiretapping Approved by Obama, McCain, and Bush. And so it shouldn't be that surprising, and it wasn't as big a switch as I think Fox News was trying to show there. But I also think that President Obama's speech, like I said, I watched the whole thing, and there were a few good things in there, but it was mostly an endorsement of the programs that are already in existence. And, you know, I guess since President Obama has been overseeing these programs for 5 years now. I guess it's not that surprising that he would endorse them, but there were a few limits he suggested putting on the programs. But let me show you, for example, Representative Mike Rogers, he's the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, a Republican who basically has never met an NSA spying program he didn't like, I don't think. He said a lot of nice things about the president's speech, and I'll show you that. This is Mike Rogers. He didn't appear on all the shows. He didn't do the full Ginsburg, but he did appear on several. And here he is. I think this is from Meet the Press, talking about how he liked the president's speech here.
Well, I thought the most important victory was the president standing up and saying, hey, the program did not have abuses. This wasn't sinister. It wasn't a rogue agency. It was legal and proper. You know, some of the suggestions on how to move forward I have some concerns with, but I thought it was an important really an important role for the president to play. I wish he'd have played it 7 months ago, but I was glad to hear it yesterday.
So, Ed.
So yeah, there you can see one of the most pro-NSA spying Republican Congress people, the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, saying that President Obama was basically endorsing the NSA spying that he supports. And, you know, that's one of the things that was disappointing about the speech. Not that surprising, as I was discussing, based on Obama's centrist tendency on this issue in the past, and even when he was running for president. And I'll give you another example. This is Michael Hayden, who is a former CIA director, former NSA director, worked for Obama and previously, and he's basically saying the same thing, that there are a lot of things that President Obama said that he really liked, and this is over on Fox News Sunday, I believe, yeah, and General Michael Hayden in this clip.
Chris, there's an awful lot to like about the speech. That first third is the most robust defense of why we conduct intelligence and how we conduct intelligence that the president has made since he's been in office. If he had been giving that speech for the last 6 months, I'm not so sure he would have had to have made the speech at the Department of Justice. Now, when you get into the substance, what he changed, I think there's a clear pattern with both the domestic and the foreign piece. He's going to cut back on some capacities. He hopes at the margins, cutting it into agility a bit, putting administrative burdens on. That could be risky, but he looks like he's willing to accept that risk in order to fundamentally preserve the programs.
And so, yeah, that's another person trying to, someone from the spy agencies, a former head of both the NSA and the CIA, saying that there was a lot to like in President Obama's speech from the point of view of an NSA spy. And I think that, yeah, is one of the most disappointing things about the speech. And after watching the speech, I looked at the commentary both from MSNBC and Fox News, and one of the more insightful comments was on MSNBC. I saw from Chris Hayes, who normally hosts the show All In with Chris Hayes, and I really enjoy his commentary. And he was saying that he thought that a lot of the speech wasn't reassuring the American people about NSA spying, was to reassure the NSA spying apparatus that President Obama was their friend, that they didn't have to worry about too robust or any changes or really robust oversight beyond what they already had to overcome, and or what they're not overcome, the way they're already overseen, I mean. And I want to show, there are some critics about that, and I want to show, here's over on Meet the Press, Dianne Feinstein, who is one of the biggest Democratic supporters. I guess since I showed Representative Mike Rogers, one of the biggest Republican supporters of NSA spying, I should show my own Senator Dianne Feinstein, who's chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and she's also a big supporter of NSA spying, and she reacts to some criticism of the president's speech, that he's basically not making many changes. This is, you'll see David Gregory read an excerpt from Bart Gellman in the Washington Post. Bart Gellman is another one of the journalists that Edward Snowden leaked to, along with Glenn Greenwald. Anyway, here is how Dianne Feinstein reacts to the criticism that the speech didn't really make any changes over here.
And critics of the speech, as I've been reading them, seem to say very little will change. Barton Gellman writes about it in the Washington Post, and here's what he says. Obama placed restrictions on access to domestic phone records collected by the National Security Agency, but the changes he announced will allow it to continue or expand the collection of personal data from billions of people around the world, Americans and foreign citizens alike. That doesn't seem like a lot of privacy protection.
Well, I would disagree with Mr. Gellman. I think that what the president has said is that he wanted to maintain the capability of the program. That as Chairman Rogers said, it has not been abused or misused, and it is carried out by very strictly vetted and professional people. Now, what he said is, by March 28th, I'm asking the Attorney General to come back to me with some suggestions and probabilities of how the data might be stored by other than the government. And I think that's a very difficult thing, because the whole purpose of this program is to provide instantaneous information to be able to disrupt any plot that may be taking place. And, you know, I think a lot of the privacy people perhaps don't understand that we still occupy the role of the great Satan. New bombs are being devised, new terrorists are emerging, new groups, actually a new level of viciousness. And I think we need to be prepared. I think we need to do it in a way that respects people's privacy rights.
Well,
yeah, so like I said, I'm kind of embarrassed that Dianne Feinstein is a Democrat and a senator from my state of California, but that's her way that she supports, and I mean, she's basically supports all the NSA spying programs and has not done a lot in terms of oversight, and that's why it's so embarrassing. But there actually were a few things in the speech that President Obama did kind of suggest some changes that would put a little bit more oversight and a little bit more restriction on the NSA spying program. And I want to show over on Fox News Sunday, they actually got General Michael Hayden to react to some of those restrictions. And you know, I showed before a clip saying that how much there are all these things he liked about the speech, but I also want to show here. This is which clip are we on here? Right, this is where Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday actually outlines what some of those changes are that are actually more restrictive, and gets the reaction of Michael Hayden here.
The president wants the NSA to get court approval before it can search the database. He wants someone other than the government to hold the records and to pursue calls only 2 steps removed from a suspected number instead of the current 3 steps removed. General Hayden, given the fact that the current NSA director, Keith Alexander, says that this bulk collection of metadata has only prevented 1 or 2 plots at the most, can't you live with those restrictions?
Well, it appears they're going to have to live with those restrictions, Chris, but let's take them one at a time. 2 versus 3 hops. Now look, when you get out to the 3rd hop, very often...
And basically, let me just quickly explain. What that means is they identify that there's a bad number. Currently, they can say, well, okay, this number called that number, called that number, called that number. 3 hops. Now it would be only 2 hops.
Now look, if the 3rd hop weren't useful from time to time, we wouldn't have been doing it in the first place. But by the time you get out there, you really pretty much discover everybody has a dentist and everybody orders pizza, all right? And so there's an impact, but it's marginal. I'm a little more concerned about going to the court every time you want to query the data. As you said, Chris, they've got the data in the big database, and then they have what's called a seed number. It's almost always a foreign number. You get a cell phone from a safe house in Yemen, and you want to ask that database, has that seed number, that bad number you now have, ever been in contact with numbers here in the United States? And the standard is, do you have a reasonable, articulable suspicion that that seed number is al-Qaeda related? That's a professional intelligence judgment. I don't know what role the court has in adding value. And you know Judge Banks, former head of the FISA court, in a letter to Congress, specifically said that.
Now, unfortunately, I didn't have time to look up what Judge Banks said there, but the idea that courts don't have anything to add to the interpretation of a reasonable suspicion based on articulable facts, that's actually, that phrase comes from the Supreme Court, from the Terry versus Ohio decision. I mean, that's one of the one of the most basic criminal justice Supreme Court decisions, and that's basically what gives you the right to do a stop and frisk, or well, just the stop and talk. What gives you the right to go up and talk to someone is a reasonable suspicion based on articulable facts that criminal activity is afoot. And of course, that's not what is supposed to be the standard for getting a warrant, to actually look into someone's papers when there's not an exigent circumstance. That's supposed to be probable cause. That's like more likely than not that a crime has occurred. And I mean, that would be the warrant requirement that Chris Wallace was describing there as one of the things that, in order to query the bulk phone record collection database, President Obama is saying that they should have to get a warrant based on probable cause, not just that lower reasonable suspicion standard. There was actually one other new restriction, or a new protection, I guess, that President Obama mentioned in his speech that I wanted to talk about. I know about 40% of my viewers are not U.S. citizens, or not in the United States anyway, according to the demographic data I get from YouTube. So I get a lot of comments from people when I talk about how NSA spying is violating the privacy rights of American citizens, and it's a constitutional problem that we need to sue about, and that's the bulk phone record collection program. But then there's also the 702 Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Program that not only gets the metadata, but actually listens to content of international phone calls, both on the U.S. citizens who make international calls, and it can also sweep up all the phone calls made between the United States and Mexico, or to Pakistan, and also internet traffic. And that is not just metadata, again, that's content. And so one of the things that President Obama outlined in his speech was that he's actually going to start worrying about the privacy of non-U.S. citizens outside the United States, that actually he's going to consider in their NSA spying, they're going to try not to violate the privacy of foreigners. And of course, this caused some, seeming, I don't know if outrage is the right word, but at least a negative reaction over on Fox News, where you can see Chris Wallace can't seem to believe that we should care about the privacy rights of anyone who doesn't live in the United States. By the way, he asked this question, Senator Patrick Leahy was on, and so here's Chris Wallace asking him about this provision, or this idea of thinking about or protecting the rights, the privacy rights of non-U.S. citizens outside the United States, over in this clip.
Senator Leahy, I can understand, because of the diplomatic uproar with Angela Merkel, the idea that we're not going to wiretap or eavesdrop on our allies, someone like a foreign leader. Why on earth would we extend our constitutional protections to foreigners, particularly when we know those countries are spying on us?
I don't think that's what the president said. Now, as General Hayden and I both know, without going into classified material, we have, as people know, we have relationships with all the intelligence services among our allies. We share a great deal of information from them in both directions. I think that a lot of these countries were getting such feedback against the United States, saying, why are they spying on us too? I think the president had to say something like this to know we're being protected. There was a growing, and I think erroneous, feeling in other countries that somehow the United States was in tapping all of them. And I think this was probably a way of helping some of our allies say it's okay for us to cooperate with the United States.
Well,
so yeah, there's Patrick Leahy saying that it's pretty much a PR move, which is, I'm not going to show the clip where Chris Wallace posed the question to Michael Hayden, but Michael Hayden basically said, yeah, it's just a PR move. It doesn't say that we're going to change anything we're already doing, and they're already not really listening into the common people in foreign countries. It's really just specific people, but basically they're going to and one of the other things they talked about that I'm not showing is Michael Hayden worried that there's already a lot of paperwork involved in trying to protect the privacy of U.S. persons, and if they try to apply that to like the 90% of data collection they do for non-U.S. persons outside the United States, it's going to create all this extra administrative problems. But anyway, I don't really know more of the details of that, but I thought I would show that clip for my non-U.S. viewers to see that President Obama is promising to try to consider your privacy. And the other thing I wanted to mention about this whole NSA spying speech that President Obama made is, even though he made these recommendations, a lot of the stuff he recommended, he asked for the Congress to work out, and it's actually, there are a couple things that are going on in the Congress. First, there's all these different bills that have been proposed, and Senator Patrick Leahy has a bill, and then actually the Patriot Act is expiring not in 2014 but in 2015, so it has to be renewed. Section 215, which is the that basically gives the government the right to get records, any tangible thing related to an investigation. So that includes business records like these phone records. So on that point, first I want to show another clip from Senator Patrick Leahy talking about how what President Obama proposed is just the beginning, and then there'll be a bunch of legislative actions coming, and I'll show you that over in this clip.
Protection. The concern that many have had, and this has united Republicans and Democrats across the political spectrum in the House and the Senate, is we've gone too much into Americans' privacy. And we've also reached a point of, if we collect everything, do we have anything? As we found in the past, sometimes we have so much stuff, we don't go through it. He has laid out a framework of the things he might do. There's still going to be legislation on this. For example, Attorney General Holder is coming to before the Senate Judiciary Committee on January 29th, the day after the President's State of the Union message. We are going to ask him a lot of questions, because a lot of it was said that between what he and the head of national intelligence have to work out, there's going to be a lot of questions, again, from both Republicans and Democrats who are concerned that we're going too much in the privacy of Americans.
So yeah, there's Senator Patrick Leahy not only saying that there's going to be upcoming hearings and legislation that's going to affect what happens, but I like one of the things he said I don't hear enough of on these shows about how if you collect too much information, then you can't find what it is that you need to see. And that's actually more of what happened before September 11th than lack of information. Was like too much information and not enough concentration on analyzing what they had, because they basically had everything they needed before the September 11th attacks. It wasn't a question of lack of data, it was just lack of analysis. And so I was glad to see that. And also on the other point about how the Patriot Act is going to expire, I want to show Senator Mark Udall, who is one of the Democrats who's really been one of the strongest advocates for civil liberties protections in the face of this NSA spying. And he addressed how, there's this legislative deadline coming up on the Patriot Act when he was on Face the Nation talking to Bob Schieffer over here.
Well, here's what looms, Bob. Next year, these authorities expire. And I believe without real reform, not a veneer of reform, but the reform that the President's panel proposed, and that in many ways the President proposed on Friday, these laws will expire. So we have real motivation to get it right and to work together. And I'm heartened by the fact that the concerns about these programs have been from right, left, and center. This has not divided on partisan lines. Americans' privacy is at the heart of our freedoms. You think about freedom, the freedom to be left alone, which is what privacy is what really characterizes much of what we as Americans think is important.
All right.
So yeah, that's one of the more hopeful clips on NSA spying that maybe the most hopeful clip that I'm showing you this morning, because a lot of the clips aren't very hopeful, but or hopeful for civil liberties protections from my point of view. But there's Senator Mark Udall saying that maybe the right and left will get together in a way that they really will protect civil liberties before the Patriot Act is renewed, and they'll really look into this. But I don't know. Also on Face the Nation was Mike Morrell, who's former deputy CIA director, and he was also on this NSA spying review commission that gave its recommendations to President Obama appointed this commission to review NSA spying. And if you watch LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup, I think it was 2 weeks ago, Mike Morrell was on, and there are a couple other people from the review panel or review group. Richard Clark, who's a former counterterrorism official in both the George W. Bush and I think I think he left before, but for several administrations before the Obama administration. Anyway, so Mike Morrell was on Face the Nation also, and he answered the question about whether there were any abuses. They had Representative Mike Rogers, in a clip I didn't show, said that there were never any abuses, and then Senator Mark Udall, in a clip I also didn't show, said that there were abuses. And here's what Mike Morrell, former deputy CIA director, at least he was willing to admit to a little bit of abuse to the bulk phone record collection data program, and you can see that here.
So there has been a handful of cases, literally a handful, where NSA employees have looked into the database inappropriately, looked at boyfriends or girlfriends. In every one of those cases, they were dealt with appropriately, and I believe actually some of them may have been fired. But that's the limited abuse that has taken place. There has been no systematic abuse. There has been no political abuse. It has been minor, very minor.
Now, that's, I guess, the extent of the abuses if you're talking about people who you can point to who are actually harmed, although I'll get to another harm in just a minute. But there are a couple other possible abuses. First, one of the things that came out in these leaks is that the FISA court said that the NSA was going way beyond what they were allowed to do, even under the very permissive FISA court standards, and even shut down the program until they were satisfied. I can't remember. I think was this in 2009? I can't remember the exact year. But so there, to the extent that that's not pointing to a person whose specific privacy was violated, but that shows that the NSA was going and collecting data about people in the United States that they weren't supposed to be collecting. And then another harm from all this, I'm going to show this clip. This is this is one of the co-founders of Reddit, was over on Meet the Press, and he talked to, his name is what's his name, Alexis Ohanian, and he I'm not going to show his whole interview, but I thought one thing he said about the cost of NSA spying, this is a harm you don't normally see discussed on the corporate media, but here's anyway what he said in this clip.
There are certainly platforms that we go into knowing that we are sort of giving up our privacy because we're sharing some tweet with the world, right? But there are plenty of others where we go in with an expectation of privacy, and that's a contract that we have with our service providers. In fact, I think one of the strongest points that hasn't been made yet is the fact that I believe Forrester recently estimated about $180 billion is going to be lost in revenue because countries and citizens around the world no longer want to do business with American companies because they no longer trust that their private data is safe. That's a real, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an investor. There's a real business cost on top of this, on top of the very important civil liberties costs.
And I
Yeah, so I thought that was an interesting clip worth playing, that there's a huge, I didn't show a clip from Representative Mike Rogers on one of the shows where he's talking about how Edward Snowden's leaks have cost us billions of dollars. I don't know, maybe I am going to play that clip because I'm going to show him smearing Edward Snowden pretty extensively in a couple clips. And I can't remember if it includes that, but he said that at least one of our, he talked about the Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, and at least one of our services has spent a couple $2 billion trying to fix the damage from the whole, what people, our enemies now know about how we surveil them. So we have to change our surveillance methods. And but I don't often hear people talk about the cost of the surveillance itself, how we're losing business because people don't trust the privacy protections. in the United States anymore and don't want to use our service providers or use our software, you know, with the NSA building in all these backdoors and lowering the ability of our encryption methods to actually encrypt. And anyway, so I want to show that. Now, before I leave the whole NSA spying topic and get on to a couple other topics, one of the big talking points that emerged from several different people on several different shows this morning, and what looked like a coordinated effort, was this was a smearing of Edward Snowden, that somehow he got help, probably from the Russians, and it makes him more of a traitor because, and you can, the main instigator of this talking point was Representative Mike Rogers, who has said a lot of really negative things about Edward Snowden, and I'm going to show him. He was, like I said, he was on several shows. First, I'm going to show him on Meet the Press, and then on Face the Nation, basically making the same charge. And the thing about it is, you never hear any actual evidence that Edward Snowden was working with the Russians, or, well, anyway, first I'll show the first from Meet the Press, and then I'll talk about it a little more before I show the next one here.
This was a thief who we believe had some help, who stole information. The vast majority had nothing to do with privacy. Our Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines have been incredibly harmed by the data that he has taken with him, and we believe now is in the hands of nation states.
What help did he have? Who helped him, do you think?
Well, there were certain questions that we have to get answered, where some of the, first of all, if it was a privacy concern he had, he didn't look for information on the privacy side for Americans. He was stealing information that had to do with how we operate overseas to collect information to keep Americans safe. That begs a question, and some of the things that he did were beyond his technical capabilities. Raises more questions. How he arranged travel before he left, how he was ready to go. He had a go bag, if you will, and how he
But how high level do you think? Who at what level
let me just say this. I believe there's a reason he ended up in the hands, the loving arms of an FSB agent in Moscow. I don't think that's a coincidence, number one. Number two, and let me just talk about this.
You think the Russians helped Ed Snowden?
I believe there's questions to be answered there. I don't think it was a gee whiz luck event that he ended up in Moscow under the handling of the FSB.
That's a significant development, if true.
Well, I said we have questions we have to answer, but as somebody who used to do investigations, some of the things we're finding we would call clues that certainly would indicate to me that he had some help, and he stole things that had nothing to do with privacy. And if I
So yeah, you can see there that Representative Mike Rogers is definitely smearing Edward Snowden, saying he was definitely helped by someone, and it probably was the Russians, but there's no real evidence there. And the fact, one thing I want to point out is there's no evidence that he gave any of the information that he leaked to the Washington Post and to the Guardian in the UK. There's no evidence that he gave that to Russia or China or any nation state. And why did he end up in Moscow? Well, I've seen other people point out, and I think I showed a clip of this a couple weeks back, he was on his way from Hong Kong to a third country, and the United States revoked his passport while he was in Russia. It was actually the decision of the United States that caused him to be trapped in the airport in Moscow. So it wasn't even his plan, and it certainly but that whole talking point there that he is, going into the arms of the FSB, which is the Russian Security Service, Mike Rogers, without any evidence, at least that I could see, he was definitely making a strong argument, and he made basically the same argument over on Face the Nation, and I'll show you that clip here.
A couple things. I said that he's likely to have had help. I think there are some interesting questions we have to answer that certainly would lend one to believe that the Russians had, at least in some part, something to do with either helping his capabilities. We noticed that a guy that was worried about privacy issues spent a lot of time, and as a recent DIA report revealed, stealing information, the vast majority of which had nothing to do with the NSA program and everything to do with our military capabilities, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, number one. He'd have to go and look for that information. There's some security things that he did get around that were clearly above his capabilities. The way he departed and how he ended up in Moscow. Now, we still have some questions there, but I can guarantee you he's in the loving arms of an FSB agent right today, and that's not good for the United States, and it's not good for the information to be shared with nation states that actually hinders and will cost us billions of dollars, by the way, Bob, to try to rectify the problems he's caused in the military operations.
Yeah, so I guess I did have that clip where he says it costs billions of dollars, which is why I want to show that Alexis Ohanian, Alexis Ohanian, the co-founder of Reddit, how it's actually the NSA spying has also cost us billions of dollars. But it wasn't just Representative Mike Rogers who's been smearing Edward Snowden for months. If you've been watching LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup, you've seen him smear Edward Snowden a lot of different ways, and with him being, making intimations about why is he in Russia and what has he shared with them, and this is just the strongest he's made it, I think. But he also got a lot of help and from several different people. It was like almost a coordinated attack, although I guess he made it early on Meet the Press, and that Meet the Press interview was then used to ask other people about it when they appeared on other shows, one of whom was the next one I'm going to show here. Oh, this is Representative Mike McCaul, a Republican congressman who was in Russia before the Sochi Olympics, and he was asked about this over on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, and he basically agreed with what Representative Mike Rogers said on Meet the Press after he was asked about it here.
Do you agree?
Hey, listen, I don't think Mr. Snowden woke up one day and had the wherewithal to do this all by himself. I think he was helped by others.
The Russians?
To say definitively, I can't answer that, but I personally believe that he was cultivated by a foreign power to do what he did. And I would submit again that he's not a hero by any stretch. He's a traitor. He lives not very far down the street from where I am right now, enjoying probably less freedoms today here in Russia than he had in the United States of America.
That's a pretty serious charge, sir. Which foreign power do you believe cultivated Edward Snowden?
Again, I can't give a definitive statement on that. But I think given all the evidence I know Mike Rogers has access to, that I've seen, that I don't think he was acting alone.
So yeah, there you can see that Representative Mike McCaul is all ready to do the same smearing, that he was cultivated by a foreign power based on what evidence, I'm not sure about that. And just to show that it wasn't just two Republicans, here's that former deputy CIA director and member of the NSA review panel, Mike Morrell, and I'm not sure he's a Democrat or a Republican as far as I know, but he's basically willing to make the same accusation against Edward Snowden over on Face the Nation here.
So I share the chairman's concern about what the Russian intelligence services may be doing with Mr. Snowden. I don't have any particular evidence, but one of the things that I point to when I talk about this is that the disclosures that have been coming recently are very sophisticated in their content and sophisticated in their timing. Almost too sophisticated for Mr. Snowden to be deciding on his own, and seems to me he might be getting some help.
That was kind of the weirdest piece of evidence, that his that the leaks are too sophisticated. Of course, he is getting help. He's got a lot of advisors now. He's got a couple major new, he's got the Washington Post and he's got the Guardian. He's got the ACLU as legal advisors, I know, and several other groups. So he is getting good advice. So that was kind of a weird piece of evidence that he's in touch with a foreign power or whatever. But I showed a couple of Republicans, and then Mike Morrell, who I'm not sure what his partisan affiliation is, but also Dianne Feinstein over on Meet the Press was not going to disagree with this whole assessment. And I mean, she did say that she wasn't sure of the evidence, but she didn't really support Edward Snowden, and she said some nasty things about Edward Snowden too. And anyway, I'll show you that clip over here.
To keep people safe. Now, let me say one thing about Mr. Snowden. I heard him on television say that he went there with the intent to scrape our systems, that he obtained a scrape tool, and he began to scrape over, I believe, a 2-month period, as much as he could get a hold of. This isn't somebody who comes upon something and says, this isn't the right thing for the government to do. I want to go out and talk to people about it. He came there with the intent to take as much material down as he possibly could.
And do you think you agree with Chairman Rogers that he may have had help from the Russians?
He may well have. We don't know at this stage. But I think to glorify this act is really to set sort of a new level of dishonor. And this goes to where this metadata goes, because the NSA are professionals. They are limited in number to 22 who have access to the data. 2 of them are supervisors. They are vetted. They are carefully supervised. The data goes anywhere else. How do you provide that level of supervision?
So yeah, that was actually a part of the NSA spying speech that President Obama made that I didn't really talk about, which was that Obama suggested that the bulk phone record collection not be done by the government, or that the data itself be kept in some other place, but not necessarily the phone companies. They're trying to figure out what would be the best place, and it was sort of like some hypothetical place yet to be determined. But you can see also there that, of course, Dianne Feinstein was willing to consider that Edward Snowden might have been cultivated by a foreign power or be a Russian traitor or whatever, but she at least admitted that maybe we have to see, we'll see. There might be evidence. And speaking of whether Edward Snowden has more or less rights than in Russia than he did in the United States, the topic of Edward Snowden came up on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where George Stephanopoulos actually got an interview with Russian President and big boss Vladimir Putin, who, even though I guess he wasn't president for a while, and there was another guy, Medvedev, or I'm mispronouncing that, who was head of Russia. Vladimir Putin has basically been the head of Russia for quite a while, and he's granted this interview, I think, because the Sochi Olympics were coming up, and I'm going to talk about that briefly in just a minute. But George Stephanopoulos asked Vladimir Putin in this one-on-one interview that he got about Edward Snowden, and I don't know why, but the question he asked was, will Edward Snowden come to the Sochi Olympics? And I'll show you Vladimir Putin's answer to that question here.
Should impact politics.
The most famous American in Russia right now is Edward Snowden. Is he invited to Sochi?
The most renowned American in Russia now is Barack Obama. Everybody is invited. Mr. Snowden is subject to the treatment of provisional asylum here in Russia. He has a right to travel freely across the country. He has no special limitation. He can just buy a ticket and come here.
And stay as long as he wants?
Yes, sure, definitely.
So that was basically the discussion of Edward Snowden that George Stephanopoulos got out of Vladimir Putin in that one-on-one interview we had. And it's an interesting interview. I'm not going to show you the whole thing, obviously, but I put links down in the video description to the sources of all the clips that I show. I think pretty much the full episodes of everything I show are available online, except for Real Time with Bill Maher. Even the Saturday Night Live episode is available in full online at that link I showed when I showed that clip from Saturday Night Live. But the Vladimir Putin interview was definitely worth watching. And the one other question and answer I want to show from that interview has to do with what, of course, the big issue, other than possible terrorist attacks, regarding the upcoming Sochi Olympics, and that's the anti-gay laws in Russia. Basically, there are laws in Russia that stop gay people from engaging in pro-gay propaganda, and there's actually a lot of anti-gay violence in Russia and a lot of homophobia. And anyway, it's been a big issue with the upcoming Olympics. And George Stephanopoulos asked Vladimir Putin in the interview whether if LGBT athletes at the Olympics, if they wear a pin or do some other protest, are they actually going to be arrested under the no pro-gay propaganda law in Russia? And I'll show you. Here's Vladimir Putin's answer to that question in this clip.
If gay or lesbian athletes engage in some sort of protest, wear a rainbow pin or some other kind of protest, will they be free from prosecution under the propaganda law?
Acts of protest and acts of propaganda are somewhat different things. They are close, but if we were to look at them from the legal perspective, then protesting a law does not amount to propaganda of homosexuality or sexual abuse of children. That's one. Two is that I'd like to ask our colleagues, my colleagues and friends, that as they try to criticize us, they would do well to set their own house in order first. I did say, after all, and this is public knowledge, that in some of the states in the U.S., homosexuality remains a felony.
The Supreme Court has struck those laws down.
How are they in a position to criticize us for what is a much softer, liberal approach to these issues than in their own country? I know that this isn't something that can be easily done. This is so because there are a lot of folks in the U.S. who share the view that the legislation in their state or in their nation is appropriate, well-grounded, and is in sync with the sentiment of the vast majority of the population.
So yeah, it sounds almost like Vladimir Putin is using the Westboro Baptist Church and those kind of people in the United States as justification for the much less strict laws than what the anti-gay laws that they might advocate would be in the United States. But also he's pointing to laws that were struck down long, like in the 80s. There was a U.S. Supreme Court case, Lawrence versus Texas, that said that anti-sodomy laws could not be enforced because it was a violation of privacy. And some of the arguments in that case led to the pro-same-sex marriage legal decisions that we're seeing these days. And so that was one of the disingenuous parts of what Vladimir Putin said there. And I noticed he kind of like put together pro-gay propaganda and pro-sexual abuse of children propaganda, which I don't think that's a very fair comparison. But anyway, I want to show that clip. And I want to show one other clip on this issue later in the roundtable. I don't normally show clips from the pundits. I try to show clips from newsmakers like members of Congress or foreign leaders like Vladimir Putin, and I try not to show the pundits themselves making their commentary, because then I'm commenting on commentary. But Mary Matalin, who is the husband of James Carville, they've been on a lot of shows recently because James Carville and Mary Matalin have a book out on their marriage and their political wars and how they keep their romance together while disagreeing on politics. And they were actually both on Real Time with Bill Maher, but I'm not showing any clips from that. But one of the most hard to believe statements on any of the Sunday shows this morning came from Mary Matalin, where she was talking about this discussion of the anti-gay laws in Russia and Vladimir Putin's comments on it. And I'll show you what she said about that on This Week with George Stephanopoulos in this clip.
Mary Matalin, that he'll actually go through with punishing people during the Olympics. They can't risk that.
Yes, and can I just say, I'm so sick of sports and politics. This week, someone came out and said, I am not gay, and I know I'm going to get in trouble for this, but all of my gay friends thinks he looks so buff in his shirtless publicity photos. I'm just saying, why is he even talking about this?
He has to talk about it. It's a huge controversy.
So Mary Matalin's comment is that all her gay friends think that Vladimir Putin looks really buff in his shirtless photos. I think she's like trying to personally set back LGBT rights a decade with her. That seemed. She said, I know I'm going to get in trouble for this. Well, that's because you're about to say something really stupid, I guess. But anyway, I wanted to show you that clip because that was, I guess, one of the hardest to believe someone actually would say that when they know they're on broadcast television clips of the morning. And that's what I want to show you on the whole gay and LGBT rights in the Sochi Olympics topic. But I want to show a couple quick clips on the Benghazi issue. There was a report this week. The Senate came out with a report. I covered Benghazi a couple weeks ago because there was this New York Times article that sort of backed up the idea that Al-Qaeda wasn't involved, and also that it did start from a protest against a anti-Islam video. And anyway, now the Senate has come out with their report, and they're saying that Al-Qaeda was involved, although they didn't really address whether it was planned or not planned. And I want to show one more clip from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. Bill Maher talked about the Senate report and gave a little bit of humorous commentary. I especially like how this ends up about whether it was planned or pre-planned. Anyway, here's that Benghazi clip here.
But it hasn't. The Benghazi report came out. The Senate did a report, finally, and it said, here are the highlights. First of all, no cover-up, which we knew, but it's nice to see the Senate endorse reality. It could have been avoided, they said, but so could have 9/11 itself and the Iraq War. I noticed that the talking point about whether it was planned or that was a big thing. Was it planned like Pearl Harbor or unplanned like a Palin pregnancy? That went away. They don't talk about that anymore.
Yeah, I really like. Was it planned like Pearl Harbor or unplanned like Palin? And I guess Bill Maher does not really like the Palins very much, and he makes that pretty clear if you are a habitual watcher of HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, which I am, of course. I don't always agree with Bill Maher, but I've actually once saw his politically incorrect show on ABC. I went and watched it live. I was in the studio audience. They taped 2 episodes actually, but and I've seen Bill Maher perform stand-up live a couple times. So I don't always agree with him, but I'm a big fan, and I thought that was definitely a good joke. But on a more serious part of what are the implications of Benghazi, I guess, of course, the real reason Republicans have been playing this up is because it was a State Department. It was an ambassador killed who was an employee of the State Department, and the head of the State Department was Hillary Clinton, and she is the leading Democratic candidate for president in 2016. She hasn't said she's going to run, of course, but that's why Republicans are trying to get as much mileage out of the whole Benghazi thing. It was originally political, I think, because of it happened in September, right before the November election, Obama versus Mitt Romney, and not that there weren't problems, and that was one of the things in the Benghazi report that the Senate, there were definitely lack of security, and there were all these warnings, but one of the things that came out, and I won't show a clip on this, was that Ambassador Chris Stevens refused increased security a couple times. So unfortunately, one of the people who died actually has some responsibility. But as to whether Hillary Clinton has responsibility, over on CNN's State of the Union, Candy Crowley asked Senator Angus King, who is an independent senator from Maine, but caucuses with the Democrats, so he's really kind of a Democratic senator. And I guess he was in on the Benghazi report, and so he talked about Hillary Clinton's responsibility in a kind of extensive answer I want to show you in this clip.
Well, I've thought a lot about that, Candy, and that's a hard question. It's ultimately a political question. Yes, she was Secretary of State. Was she the person making decisions about security at U.S. facilities? By the way, there are over 100 around the world that have security. Did somebody come to her and say, we need more security at Benghazi, and she said, no, don't bother. There's no evidence that I've seen that she was directly involved in that decision. On the other hand, she's the CEO, she's the boss, and I've gone back and looked at the law and how you hold CEOs accountable for lapses in the down the line, and generally the standard is there has to be some either knowledge or participation in the decision. As I said at the beginning, I think the American people are going to have to make this decision. I'm not being a partisan of Hillary here, but I do think you've got an organization with 20 or 30 or 40,000 people. To say that an individual decision about one facility is the responsibility of the boss who really wasn't making that decision. Now, having said that, there's no question the State Department screwed up here. And there should be accountability, in my opinion. Who did make that decision in light of all the information, and why? And I think that's a very fair question. And frankly, I'm surprised and disappointed. I know some people have been sort of shifted around, but you know, if accountability means anything, it means somebody paying a price for having made a disastrous decision.
So yeah, I think that is a more reasonable look at the Benghazi events and whether there should be accountability and what went wrong, and as to whether Hillary Clinton is going to be held accountable for what happened. Because she was the head of the State Department, she has some accountability, but there's no like real accountability for knowing or making any decisions or even knowing about any lack of security. So you know, I think that's a good way to address whether she had responsibility or not. Depends on your point of view, and if she runs for president, there's no doubt that it's going to come up. And I think that's going to be the way that Senator Angus King described it there. That's basically going to be the way that people will decide the issue of Hillary Clinton's responsibility for Benghazi if she does run. But speaking of scandals that may affect the 2016 presidential election, I wanted to show a few clips on the Bridgegate scandal, or New Jersey Governor Chris Christie's scandals, where Bridgegate is this scandal where he supposedly, or at least his deputy chief of staff, has been shown to written an email saying it's time for a traffic problem in Fort Lee, New Jersey, where they closed down lanes on the George Washington Bridge that tied up traffic for 4 days, supposedly as payback, possibly political payback for the mayor not endorsing Chris Christie, or there are possible other explanations I've seen floated. But on that issue, over on Meet the Press, the assembly person whose name I seem unable to pronounce, who I showed last week, who's one of the main investigators in the New Jersey Assembly, who's issuing the subpoenas. He talked about, he answered the question as to whether is this illegal or is this just like the hardball politics of New Jersey that is just like the way things are politically in New Jersey. Over on Meet the Press, this is Assembly person John Wisniewski. I don't know why I can't pronounce it, but anyway, here he is on Bridgegate in this clip.
Is Chris Christie a bully who abused power, or are you seeking to criminalize the rough and tumble of New Jersey politics?
No. I mean, New Jersey politics is rough and tumble, and that's not going to change. But abusing power should not be condoned. You know, everybody mistrusts government. And when things like this happen, it only gives them another reason to say, there they go again. And so we have to make sure that it can't happen again. And that's the one way we restore trust in government. But this is not preordained, and we have no connection to Governor Christie. We're going to look to see who else in his office knew. We're going to follow the trail where it leads step by step.
All right.
So yeah, that's the assembly person who is investigating Bridgegate, but there was actually an additional scandal added to Bridgegate, and this is this Hoboken scandal, and the mayor of Hoboken, her name is Dawn Zimmer. She was on MSNBC earlier in the week, and then she came on CNN State of the Union to talk about how the lieutenant governor came to her back around the time of after Hurricane Sandy and said, if you don't support this Rockefeller Center development project, you're not going to get your Hurricane Sandy money for Hoboken. And also the lieutenant governor told her that this came directly from Chris Christie. And you can see Candy Crowley kind of on CNN State of the Union cross-examined her a little, first saying, why didn't she come out back in May of 2008 when this happened? And she explains that over in this clip.
Well, you know, back in May when, you know, the lieutenant governor came and very directly said to me that these two things are connected, I didn't think anyone would believe me. I really didn't. I mean, I do, looking back, you know, I probably should have come forward, but I really didn't think anyone would believe me. And quite frankly, if I came forward, no one believes me, then I'm going to put Hoboken in an even worse position. And my #1 priority as the mayor of Hoboken is to fight to make sure that we can get as many Sandy funds as possible. That's my #1 priority. And I was really concerned that if I came forward, no one believed me, that we would really be cut out of the Sandy funding. But as I watched the coverage with the Bridgegate, you do see parallels. And I just felt, you know, I had an obligation to come forward. And as I look at the second tranche of funding that's coming through, I'm concerned we're going to be cut out.
So yeah, there's her explanation as to why she's coming forward now and she didn't come forward then. And one of the big pieces of evidence against her that some of the people in Chris Christie's camp who are criticizing her have used is that she said a lot of really positive things about Governor Chris Christie even after this event where she was threatened supposedly happened. And Candy Crowley over on CNN State of the Union, being a good journalist, actually cross-examined her on that point about how she tweeted something really positive about Governor Christie after this happened, and I'll show you her answer over in this clip.
So in May, you have this conversation, and the lieutenant governor says to you, this is a direct message from Chris Christie, get behind this project or funds may be in jeopardy for your recovery. And then in August, I think is when you tweeted, I'm so glad he's governor of New Jersey. It's just hard to put those two things together.
Well, again, I mean, I had to, you know, basically almost set aside what she said to me because you know, it is unbelievable, but it's true. It's true, and I'm coming forward, and you know, I just didn't feel that we were going to be able to get the funding. I was concerned that people weren't going to believe me. I mean, it's stunning. It's outrageous. But it's true, and I stand by my word, and like I said, I'm willing to testify under oath. And I think when she testifies under oath, we're going to see, you know, if she's asked to testify under oath, I think we're going to see the truth come out because I believe she will be truthful under oath. And I think, you know, you look at their response, they did not respond to the #1 question. Are they linking Hoboken Sandy funding to the Rockefeller project? The fact is they are. And
yeah, so I think that is kind of the future of the Bridgegate scandal there, that people are going to be subpoenaed and they're going to have to testify under oath. And will the lieutenant governor, who the mayor of Hoboken there, Don Zimmer, is saying, threatened her, saying if you don't support this Rockefeller development project, you're not going to get funding for Hurricane Sandy relief. If she's put under oath, the lieutenant governor's, if she's put under oath, will she testified truthfully in the way that Don Zimmer thinks she will? That could directly link Governor Chris Christie to this kind of threat. And then as to whether it's illegal or not, I mean, it certainly doesn't seem like something that would be palatable to most American viewers. At least I hope, most American voters, at least I hope not. But before I finish up there, I want to show, of course, Fox News Sunday was the only one of the Sunday morning shows that did anything on Obamacare, and they had this security expert, David Kennedy, and you know, for all I know, I haven't really looked into the issue that carefully. There may be security vulnerabilities in the healthcare.gov website. I wouldn't be surprised, but I want to show, there were a couple of clips. He seemed not to really talk so much about finding real lapses in security. He liked to use this analogy, and I noticed there was one analogy he used a couple times to make it seem more simple to the viewer. First, I'll show you. Here's the first time in this clip.
These type of attacks that you know I'm mentioning here in the 70,000 that you're referencing is very easy to do. It's a rudimentary type attack that doesn't actually attack the website itself. It extracts information from it without actually having to go into the system. Think of it this way. Think of something where you have a car and the car doors are open and the windows are open. You can see inside of it. That's basically what they allow you to do, and there's no real sophistication level here. It's just really wide open. So
So I guess the Obamacare website is like a car with the car doors open and you can see in the windows. And I don't know, does that really give you much information? But in case you think that was just a one-time thing, here is another analogy that security expert David Kennedy made about Obamacare on Fox News Sunday this morning in this clip.
And what we do is we look at, problematic areas around the website. And if you're seeing these type of exposures just on the website, just by looking at it, there's a much more larger problem on the inside. And it's 100% certainty because of how the website was designed and how it was architected and how it was sped along. They're problematic areas. I use the example in Congress. If a car is driving by, and I've been a mechanic for 14 years instead of security, and the engine's making clanking sounds, there's blue smoke puffing everywhere, and there's oil leaking, you probably have a good understanding that the engine itself is bad. And that's what's happening here in the healthcare.gov infrastructure. And
so yeah, he seems to be sticking to one particular analogy. Are we talking about Obamacare or are we talking about Obamacare? Because he seems to be talking more about a car than a website. I don't know. Anyway, I just wanted to show those clips just so I can make that Obamacare joke. Obamacare joke, I guess. But before I finish up and look real quickly to the comments in the live discussion going on, and I'm happy to see that we've got over 250 comments already, so I'll try to see what I can get out of there. But I want to show one more clip. I have a undergraduate degree in history, and I did my concentration in military history because I was kind of a pacifist, although I believe in kind of a strict self-defense, but so I'm not a total pacifist. But I have a strong interest in military history and war and how we should analyze our military decisions from a historical perspective. And I wanted to show this one last clip from former Defense Secretary Robert Gates. Was over on Meet the Press, and he talked about several different more specifically newsworthy topics, but then he made sort of this more general statement about how war is both unexpected or there are unpredictable aspects of it, and then he first also talked about how our U.S. wars seem to be more and more unwinnable, and I thought it was kind of insightful way of anyway, I'll show you an insightful way of looking at that I'll show you over in this clip.
That I wanted to ask you about the future of war. Here is what you said back in 2011 at West Point. In my opinion, any future defense secretary who advises the president to again send a big American land army into Asia or into the Middle East or Africa should have his head examined, as General MacArthur so delicately put it. Does that mean to say that you think Iraq and Afghanistan will never truly be won, will never be seen as victory?
I think that one of the other things that I write in the book is that if you look back to the Korean War, there are very few instances where we have been militarily engaged in a major conflict where we have come out with what we saw as a victory, as clear-cut as in World War II or in the first Gulf War in 1991. Whether it was Korea or Vietnam or Iraq or Afghanistan, there is not a conclusion to these conflicts that end in a victory parade. And the other aspect of this that I think is important as we look at the future of war is, as I put in the book, and as I said often as a Secretary of Defense, in the last 40 years, our record in predicting where we would use military force next, even 6 months out, is perfect. We've never once gotten it right. From Grenada under President Reagan to Haiti to Panama, the Balkans, against Iraq twice, Afghanistan, Libya twice, you name it. We didn't know 6 months ahead we were going to be in those places in those kinds of conflicts.
I thought that was a really interesting comment, and about not on what's going on in the news necessarily this week, but sort of a more general view of warfare and how the the more you study the history of military strategy and the history of warfare, I think it supports sort of a more pacifist viewpoint, or at least an almost pacifist viewpoint like I was describing for myself. So anyway, I thought that was sort of a more general thinking thing to think about than the more specific news of the day or news of the week type clips I normally show. So I wanted to end with that, and I see I'm like over an hour and 10 minutes already, so I want to end the show pretty quickly, but I also am glad to see that I've got over 100 people watching, and I've got kind of some good comments. Like I said, over 250 comments in the comment section, so I want to see if I can take a few of those real quick before I sign off. My dog is waiting over there. Let's see if I got it looks like people arguing with each other as usual. Steve Enver says, why don't they check the data of Christie, Fort Lee, and Hoboken? Yeah, maybe they could use NSA spying to resolve the whole Bridgegate scandal. That's a good idea. No, I don't think that was actually going to happen. Even if they could, that would be like too revealing for them to do something like that. But let's see. Hans Blitz says, then the Special Activities Division waterboards a 19-year-old pizza delivery kid because he has a suspicious beard. Couldn't a terrorist buy a track phone? What do they do then? Yeah, I don't know. One of the things that I didn't really talk about when I showed the clips is that this whole bulk phone record collection program, first, there's no real evidence that it stopped any terrorist attacks, and also I did a whole video on how I don't think it would have stopped the 9/11 attack, and it has to do with that comment from Patrick Leahy I showed about how too much information can actually obscure the information you want to find, and whatever. There's a lot of problems there, but let me see if I can get when I see arguing with each other, talking to each other, Let's see. Bright Eye 07. Yeah, it's all made up right until someone you care about gets blown up by a suicide bomber. Oh, I think I'm quoting from an argument between, Volgograd was fake, the Boston. There's this big argument going on between people. It's always what happens. Gabor Cosper says, yeah, he's just raising questions, right? Is he a Nazi? Is he a commie? I don't know. I'm just asking questions here. I think that's kind of what Mike Rogers was just asking questions about Edward Snowden. I think that's what they're talking about. But yeah, I'm glad that all of you are in here leaving questions. And before I finish up the show, I do have this idea for some upcoming Liberal Viewer Sunday live clip roundups that I may try to get both the live viewers and those of you watching the recorded show to vote for what you think the best clip of all the clips I showed was, and I'll either just upload that clip as a single video or make some edited produced video, or if it's not the best clip, what the best topic was, and I'll try to make some video out of that. Although on weeks like this where I showed 28, 29 clips, I think, and like half of them were on NSA spying. I don't want to show all those clips as a video. But anyway, basically the idea is I'm trying to come up with a way to make a shorter video out of the clips I showed in this over hour-long program because there are some people who like the shorter videos. And I did that last week. As if you saw it, I made a video about Bridgegate, about how is New Jersey Governor Chris Christie like a mob boss, ? And it was basically an edited, produced version of the first two clips I showed on Liberal Viewer Sunday live clip roundup last Sunday. So I'm going to possibly do more stuff like that, and I'm hoping to get some comments and some insight from both the live viewers and the people who watch it as recorded show. Anyway, thank you all for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you enjoyed the 28, 29 clips I picked out for you. And this is the show I do, 6:30 p.m. every Sunday, 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. Join me and look for the edited proofs video I hope to be making for you this week, either out of these clips or some other topic, possibly on NSA spying. For my U.S. viewers, thank you for spending the end of your weekend with me. I hope you enjoy the end of your Sunday, and my viewers in Europe and around the world, hope you enjoy the beginning of your week, your Monday morning. thank you for watching, and I guess I'll be seeing you around the internet.